Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining me today. Welcome to Munich, Germany, the future of Orgsync. This presentation was prepared for Eric Fortenberry, CEO, Don Fortenberry, CFO, and Michael Schwartz, COO, as well as the rest of the executive board and all the marketing and operations directors for Orgsync. I am Jeremy McCoon, the business development director for Orgsync, and I am making this presentation today, March 7th, 2014. Throughout this presentation, we will go over a brief introduction about Orgsync, then get into the details about Munich, including its statistics, sites, events and activities, transportation, and nearby major economic cities within a 2-hour flight. Then we will go over the cultural differences between Germans and Americans, tips for Americans doing business in Germany, a few final considerations, and then conclude the presentation. We begin by looking at the current state of Orgsync. Currently, Orgsync is headquartered in Dallas, Texas. According to the Orgsync website, its goal is to centralize everything a student organization would need to operate online. Currently, the company serves more than 250 campuses, 35,000 student organizations, and 1 million student users in the United States, Canada, Australia, and Qatar. Munich is located in the heart of Europe and is a major business and technology hub in Germany. Between its highly skilled labor force, beautiful location, and access to an extensive communications network, it is the perfect location for Orgsync's European expansion. Let's first look at the facts and figures making Munich an ideal location for Orgsync. The language in Munich is German. In particular, it is a High German dialect in reference to the high geographical location of the city in the hills and mountains of southern Germany. The common currency of much of the European Union is the euro. Munich has a population of a little more than 1.3 million people, and an annual gross domestic product of just over 77 billion euros. Its unemployment rate is the lowest of all major German cities at 4.6%. The largest industry in the city is the software gaming industry, and the information technology sector saw the largest growth of any industry in employment between 2007 and 2011 at 33.4%. Finally, Munich has a very highly skilled labor force, being the second largest college city in Germany. Now let's look at some of the many things to do for employees around the Munich region. First, there are many great attractions to see in and around the city. The first of these attractions is Altstadt, or Old Town. This is probably the most picturesque part of the city. Starting in the Marienplatz, you can visit the Mariensäule, a statue of the Virgin Mary, the Altes and Neues Rathaus, or Old and New Town Halls, the famous Glockenspiel with its chiming bells and animated statues, the Frauenkirche, a beautiful Gothic church with twin spires, which you can see on the left-hand side of this photo, and the Peterskirche, which is the oldest the oldest church in Munich. Once you're done, you can find a variety of local and international foods at the Christkindlmarkt, and if any fine shopping can be done along Maximilianstrasse, which is basically the equivalent of New York's Fifth Avenue. Now, if sports are more your interest, you can go over to the Alliance Arena to catch a great game of Bundesliga soccer. This modern stadium was built in 2005 and is home to two teams, TSV 1860 München and European powerhouse FC Bayern München. Finally, you can make your way to the Olympic Stadium complex. The unique architecture was designed for the 1972 Olympics, but is still open for tours and various activities still today. In fact, the two soccer teams used to play here up until the building of the Alliance Arena. Now, if you're looking for things beyond sports and sightseeing, you can always check out all the major cultural events going on in and around Munich. First, around Christmas time, you can make your way to the Christkindlmarkt, which is a Christmas market put up for the season in the Marienplatz. It has handmade gifts, wonderful spiced wine called Glühwein, and delicious candied almonds. Germans are very active people and love to be outside. A Volksmarch is the perfect combination of the two. These hikes go through the hills of Bavaria and are offered in 15 kilometers, 10 kilometers, and 5 kilometers. And following the completion, you will receive a small gift, usually something like a custom beer mug or a variety of other unique items. Now, between the third weekend in September and the first weekend in October, you can visit the famous Oktoberfest. Every year, just over 6 million people visit the Oktoberfest, and they consume almost 7 million liters of beer. And if you're not up for the crowds, many smaller towns around Bavaria offer fests, still giving you the German culture without the crowds of people. Fasching is the German version of Carnival. It begins on the 11th day of the 11th month at 11:11 a.m. and lasts until Ash Wednesday. Many decorative masks represent the evil spirits of winter and good spirits of spring tied to the celebrations. And it's made its way into the Christian traditions, as I said, leading up to Ash Wednesday. And honestly, there are just too many different sites and events to see to list them in this short presentation. So I definitely encourage you to check them out for yourselves, either in person or find more information online as well. Next, Germans do quite a bit of driving, just like here in the United States, but it's not nearly as necessary as it is for us. You can basically get from point A to point B in Europe without ever touching a car. First, walking is a very common way to get around the city. There are even parts of Altstadt you can't even take a car. So walking will actually give you the best access. The next option would be riding your bicycle. Munich is an extremely bike-friendly city and has over 700 kilometers of paths. The city also dedicates lanes and traffic lights just for bicycles. Finally, Munich has one of the best public transportation systems in the world. The S-Bahn is the local train which runs from the city to the outlying neighborhoods, and as well as major national and international trains. The U-Bahn is the equivalent to many American subways. Finally, the bus system is extremely clean and a great way to get to all the trains. For our European business dealings, it should be pretty easy to get around to meetings and events. As I mentioned before, you can get anywhere that you want in Europe simply by using a train. But if air travel is more your style, there are many major European cities within a 2-hour flight from Munich. A few other cities are just over 2 hours away by plane, including Madrid and London. Now, in order for Orgsync to succeed, we need to analyze some of the differences between Germans and Americans. Now, there are many similarities Germans and Americans share, which should make doing business in the country fairly simple. There are also several key cultural differences, though, that we must address before we can move forward with this expansion. First, Germans tend to be more deductive in their thinking, while Americans are more inductive. This means that Germans are more likely to examine the details before developing goals, whereas Americans set goals first, then gather their details. Next, Germans are known to act more slowly when attempting to put a product on the market. Americans are much more likely to act too quickly. This means that a German product, although 100% ready, has sometimes already been beat to the market, whereas Americans will put out a product with problems to get a product out first. Many Americans see Germans as pessimistic, but Germans see themselves as being realistic, and Americans being too optimistic. This can create some problems for an American selling a product to a German, so it's something to consider. Next, Germans are much more direct in their arguments. A German is more likely to argue, so he or she might understand a task or a concept. A German will come out directly and say, "No, I don't agree. Whereas an American will say something like, I like your point, but, simply so they can reduce a conflict. Another common problem are there are multiple meanings for the word problem, while Americans have several terms for problem. To a German, a problem could be an issue, a challenge, or a concern, and those are all brought into the word problem. Americans, though, have separate words for all of these types of problems, which could confuse a German into thinking there isn't a problem to begin with. Finally, Germans are quiet listeners who don't really react much and sit quietly until the other person is finished. A lot of Americans see this as the German not listening, when in fact he or she is just being polite. Americans, on the other hand, participate in active listening. They may nod or say things like right or I understand to show they were listening. But Germans sometimes think this is rude and interrupting. Germans and Americans also differ in their meeting styles. Germans are less likely to take a risk than Americans when trying to solve a problem. Germans are also more formal, using a lot more procedural behaviors, which can be a little overwhelming to Americans who are used to more informal meeting styles. As I said before, Germans are also more argumentative, and this is true in meetings as well. Americans are more individualistic and seem to respect the idea of individual beliefs. Finally, German meetings will focus on identifying and analyzing a problem before trying to solve it. Americans are much more solution-oriented, choosing to try to find a solution without fully understanding a problem. Obviously, there are advantages and disadvantages to both styles. American meetings tend to actually find solutions to a problem faster, but without the same accuracy as Germans. Now that we've looked at the differences between Germans and Americans, we should discuss the tips for an American doing business in Germany. First, always use formality first. In the German language, you can be the formal Sie or the informal Du. If you are not sure how a German would like to be addressed, use Sie until he or she tells you otherwise. When deciding to address a German by his or her first name or last name, you should follow the same rules. So you want to go formal first until he or she tells you informal is okay. So in the formal context, you would call somebody Herr Smith rather than calling him John. Now, when speaking English to Germans, you want to speak the same way you would like them to speak German to you. It's pretty obvious. You do not want to use slang, and you want to make sure that you speak clearly and slowly. Next, you want to be prepared to argue. As I said before, Germans argue to understand a concept or a task. Make sure you have support for your task or concept. According to Lamson in her article on cultural differences between Germans and Americans in 2005, you should make good, concrete, unemotional arguments in response. Do not take their arguments as impolite. It is simply their way of understanding what it is you would like them to do. Next, you should always be realistic when presenting an idea to Germans. Again, they are realistic, although our culture would view them as pessimistic. They want to fully understand what it is a product or an opportunity can do for them. Simply state the facts. Now, Germans are very task-oriented, so you should focus on work while at work. They are very meticulous and take a lot of pride in their work, so they focus on it more in the workplace. It's also a good idea to socialize with them outside of work. They see relationships as important, and it will actually help you work better with them in the office. And because of the differences between Germans and Americans in their meetings, the outcome of those meetings can actually be more beneficial than if it was conducted with solely Americans or solely Germans. It will help us as Americans find better solutions rather than rushing. Basically, we can understand the problem better. It will also help Germans by allowing them to find solutions faster. Understand and adapt to the differences, and meetings can be more productive than ever. Now let's take a look at some final considerations when doing business in Germany. First, first of all, a major misunderstanding is that Germans work as much, if not more, than Americans. This is not true. The average German work week is only 37.5 hours, whereas we work a minimum of 40 hours a week. This does not mean they do not work hard. Again, they take great pride in their work and want it to be perfect. Next, unions are very strong in Germany. Germany focuses more on employee benefits than customer benefits. In fact, this can actually be a benefit to the customer since they are probably getting the best products this way. Now, German unions work directly with trade organizations instead of with the companies themselves, and have basically offered shorter work weeks and longer vacation times for their employees. Finally, Germans have roughly the same number of holidays we have here in the United States. Many of the differences in Bavaria in particular are the Catholic holidays. It is a heavily Catholic region, so they have state holidays like Ascension, Assumption, Corpus Christi, and a variety of other holidays to keep in mind. In conclusion, by taking advantage of the benefits of doing business in Munich and understanding the cultural differences between Germany and the United States, Orgsync will be successful. We as an organization just need to embrace the culture and address differences. Thank you. Now, I'd like to open up this time to take any kind of questions or concerns that anyone may have.